Just admitting everyone to the group. Also, I am on my laptop, so the quality of my screen isn't going to be the best, but this is the only way to record the meeting. I don't know who we're expecting or who else is going to be joining for this call exactly. I don't think it's going to be a massive group. That's fine. We'll just see who shows up. But I'm really glad that you are here. Welcome. This week, I hope you've been able to really hone into your 2024 goals and your intentions, and also any of the barriers that stand in your way, the rules that may be keeping you stuck, and then also just coming up with your very own action plans to beat the hell out of these rules. This live is mainly just here to have a chat, to troubleshoot, to ask any questions. Some of the people who couldn't make it in different time zones, etc., sent through some of their questions as well, so we'll be going through them. But before that, I do also have 2 short announcements that I want to start off with. And one is that this is, a little group challenge, and it's great, but while 6 days is a good amount of time to maybe kick things into gear, it's not going to make or break your recovery. You might need a little bit more intensive support, and that is okay too. So for anyone who is not currently in coaching with me, I wanted to offer a free 30-minute chat just to talk through your goals, to ensure you'll be able to put what we've covered this week into practice. And while I'm pretty snowed in with work, I have managed to put some availability up on my calendar. So I'll pop that link in the description. Once the replay goes up, I'll pop it into the chat now as well. For anyone who is already in coaching with me, obviously we can go through that during a session as well, just to make sure we've got those goals lined up and we know what we're doing in order to reach those goals. I'll stick that into the chat now. And yeah, the second little announcement. If you've started 2024 with all the right intentions, which I assume you have, considering you're here, you're part of this group, keep prioritizing your recovery. If this program has been your wake-up call, but you'd like some additional support, or you'd like to keep going with this momentum, then yes, signing up to one-to-one coaching is an option. I have 2 spaces available, so I know that's not loads, but jump on it if you think this is for you. And also I have the 8-week group program starting in February. So that's just 3 weeks time. It'll be a very tight-knit group, 24/7 support, online modules, resources, weekly lives. There's 2 spaces remaining for that. Let me know if you're interested, and we can talk through it before you commit to anything. And I do also have a special little discount that I can offer for that. But yeah, with that little sales pitch out of the way, I'm not a marketing woman. I don't know what I'm doing with that. I'm just very excited about the program because I know kind of benefits are brought to the previous group. Let's get to some of those questions. As I said, a few people sent some questions in, but I'm going to prioritize the people who are here because you're here. So if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat, or feel free to unmute for a moment and share. Actually, maybe while they're being typed up, I'll respond to one I've already got just because it's a limited time, and then I'll look at that one, if that's all right. One of the questions that I got from someone who couldn't make it today, she was out all day, was, I'm writing the fear foods and challenges, and already just writing them gives me great anxiety. I cannot imagine facing them if even writing them causes so much anxiety. Any tips? So obviously I'll be sharing my tips, but feel free to share your own tips as well. I'd love to see at least one tip from each and every one of you in the chat or in the comments section once this goes up for the replay. Just because thinking about these things yourself is an incredible way to motivate yourself and get yourself on the right path. If we say one thing and do another, that creates a massive amount of dissonance, which means that either you need to change the thought or change the behavior, and a lot of the time changing the behavior to align with that thought is easier. So that's my challenge to you right now, whenever you're watching this or if you've joined this, to share your tip as well. But my tips for dealing with that anxiety is, and writing those lists, it is normal that brings up a lot of emotion. Put yourself in the right state of mind when starting out. Maybe play some music, take some breaths, have your support network there as you do it. And then doing the challenges too will no doubt be tough. And again, bolster your facilitators, reduce your barriers. This is something we go through in a lot of depth in the 8-week program. And just do it. Plan it in to make it non-negotiable and then do it. Putting it off tends to merely increase that fear and increase that cycle of avoidance and fear. It's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, so at some point you need to just plan it in, know that there's no way around that, and push through, sit through the discomfort, because that discomfort does pass, and then repeat. With every repeat, you prove that nothing bad happens. With every repeat, you prove that fear reduces just a little bit again and again. With every repeat, you prove that nothing bad happens. With every repeat, you prove that fear reduces just a little bit again and again. There's also some other tools like reframes, recovery reminders that can be really helpful as well. Again, all things I cover in a lot of depth in the more intensive 8-week program. And as I said, 2 spaces available. Feel free to comment 8-week or program, or to message me after if you want to snatch up a space. But the most important thing is to take that action, to push through that discomfort in whichever way you can do that. So that's also what we focused on in this past week, and hopefully that's bearing some fruits for some of you. Okay, so in the chat at the moment, one of the questions is, how do you do the right amount of physical activity or exercise in recovery? That's a very individual thing, I think. Some people in their recovery will have never had a maladaptive or compulsive relationship with exercise. Some people will never be or have been underweight. In those circumstances, there might be a bit more flexibility for people who are at a low weight, who are undernourished, not eating enough, who have a compulsive relationship with exercise. A lot of the time they need to drastically cut back on the exercise for all of those reasons, because all of those reasons can make it riskier mentally, physically, physiologically to engage in that exercise. For example, if you are underweight, if you're not getting your period, that exercise puts a lot of extra stress on your body and can be really detrimental to your bone health, because your estrogen levels aren't going to be in the right levels because you're not menstruating. But yeah, as I said, also psychologically, just taking that break can be really beneficial to break some of those associations, to break some of those patterns, to break away from what the eating disorder is telling you to do. So yeah, depending on where you are in your recovery, depending on your unique circumstances, that would be my advice. And for me personally, I took a complete break for a period of time just to break those associations, to give my body rest. And it was only once I weight restored that I properly sort of dared to do more than the bare minimum. Any kind of movement before that time, I felt scared to do, to be honest. And I know that's not ideal either, but I was very wary of putting additional stress on my body. I hope that answers that question, but let me know if there's any other related questions. Oh, and there's a few more questions that have come in. I love it. Thank you. I've been really struggling with not feeling hungry at all, but still I know I should gain weight and regain my period back. Should I just mechanically up my intake drastically? Would my hunger cues come back with it? Will metabolism speed up even though I don't feel hungry for the amounts and just mechanically eat more? What would help my hunger cues come back? Okay, I'll tackle them one by one. So, should I just mechanically up my intake drastically? Yes. Because you've been suppressing your hunger cues or not really listening to them, it's quite normal that they're not back yet. And, you know, the anxiety that might come alongside eating at the moment might also mean that those hunger cues are not reliable right now. So eating more mechanically can be really helpful, also in order to just establish new routines, to make sure you get enough energy in, and to make sure you eat at regular intervals. Because eating at those regular intervals itself can be a really good way to tell your body that fuel is no longer scarce, and your hunger cues can, as a result of that, come back. But it can take some time. Will metabolism speed up even though I don't feel hungry for the amounts and just mechanically eat more? Yes. So your metabolism has slowed down right now because it's not getting enough nutrition, not enough bulk, not enough energy in general. By eating these more sufficient meals and regular meals, you help move things along. Also, you provide your body with the energy it needs for your metabolism to run optimally. So all of those things are going to be really important in getting your metabolism back up to speed. And then the last question was, what would help my hunger cues come back? Precisely that. Eating regular and sufficient meals is the absolute best way to get your hunger cues to come back. And also listening to your body in other ways. For example, when it needs rest, when it needs X, Y, or Z. Really telling your body at every opportunity you get that its cues are valid and acknowledged and listened to. Because those hunger cues disappear in the first place a lot of the time because they're not listened to. After a while, your body thinks, well, what am I sending these cues out for anyway? So yeah, just tuning back into them. And no, there's not too many questions. I love every single one of those questions. And you know, you get priority treatment here today because you made it to the live session. So I love it, thank you. The next question, do you recommend eating at least something like 3,000 or 4,000 calories? Not counting, but estimated. In recovery, despite the hunger cues being whatever they are. I love that you say not counting, but estimated. I definitely wanted to say that, you know, counting can be its own issue, problem for some people, not for everyone. But I definitely do recommend upping your intake to, I would say, at least 2,500. There's a fair amount of research from, as far as I'm aware, on that number as a minimum. So yeah, considering that as your minimum, but yeah, having that range of, you know, 3,000 to 4,000, great. The quicker you are able to jump into that and maybe, you know, do that with some medical monitoring at the start, if you're not yet past those initial stages, but the quicker you can jump into that, the quicker you can regain the weight that you were never meant to lose anyway, the quicker you can regain your health, the better. Your body will thank you for it tremendously. And your metabolism and everything else that comes alongside that. And yeah, that should be despite the hunger cues, because those hunger cues are not going to be reliable in the least right now. Related to the previous question, would taking a break from all movement help with the hunger cues and metabolism? For a lot of people, yes, because a lot of people do find that because of their low energy availability, because of maybe
compulsive exercise that came before, taking that break is exactly what their body needs. So taking that break to their body is an indication that they're listening to those cues, again, that they're listening to their real needs. So taking a break gives your body the sense that, yeah, I'm being listened to again. I can send out other cues, like hunger cues again as well. Taking that break also means that your body isn't in a constant fight or flight, and it feels safer to carry out repairs, to do things like speed up the metabolism and all of those other functions that right now may be put on hold. So it can be really helpful for a lot of different reasons.
Another question in the chat: how do you break ingrained habits? Sort of like what we talked about before and what we covered a lot, throughout this week. But first off, recognizing which of the behaviors, which of the habits have become ingrained, making those maybe more subconscious or unconscious things more conscious, and then actively going against them. So some people take a very flexible approach to this, try to challenge it whenever they can. Some people will literally plan it into their diary. On this day, I am challenging this food rule. On this day, I am facing this for your food, etc. The more times you do this, the less ingrained that behavior or that habit becomes. And the easier it becomes as well, because initially that anxiety response is going to be huge, but hopefully over time that peak is going to not be as high of a peak, and eventually it just levels out and it becomes the new normal. Hi Nicole, we're just doing a bit of Q&A at the moment, so if you have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat as well. And while you're doing that, or while anyone else is asking any more questions in there, I do want to go back to one other question, or one other series of questions that came in from another group member who's unfortunately, or well, fortunately for her, asleep right now because of her time zone. She asked the following questions. I've just brought them up. 1, ways to deal with and get over the feeling of guilt after eating. So at the start of this Q&A session, we talked a bit about dealing with anxiety, and I think dealing with the guilt after eating, it can do with a fairly similar approach. So know that that is a feeling that peaks and then subsides, and it's a feeling. So it does not mean that you need to act on it or do anything about it or suppress it or appease the eating disorder to try and deal with it. It does pass, and with repeated exposure, it just won't be as big a deal anyway after some time. Having said that, it will be at first. It will feel like a massive task, a massive challenge, and that guilt can be pretty damn intense. So have distractions ready for times that are the toughest, or, for example, if you've planned a big challenge, or if you're going to be around people who may be more triggering, or any other circumstances that may make it more difficult. And also have your support network there, and or know who to reach out to. You don't want to get stuck in this reassurance seeking cycle where whenever you challenge anything or do anything, you need other people to validate that. But at the same time, there is a time and place for support. You do sometimes need those crutches before you learn to walk again on your own, and that is fine. Asking for help is not a weakness. Second question from this same person, there's 3 questions, is any advice on building self-confidence? And I think that's a really good question, something that a lot of us do struggle with, and it's something that I struggled with, for a long time, even after I overcame a lot of those eating disorder behaviors and other beliefs. what helped me most was to first off really start with the self-care, to really prioritize that and fake it till you make it. So telling your body that it deserves this care until you really start to believe it. And in that same kind of line, on the same concept, is nourishing your body, listening to it when it asks for food or rest or anything else. I also cover a lot of tools and techniques in the 8-week program. So in terms of self-care, but also in terms of positive mantras, gratefulness journaling, generally just shifting your attention to those positive things more and more, including the way you view your body. It does take time, but also over time, over that recovery period, I found, and a lot of other people do find, that body image just takes up less mental space. Initially, you're thinking about food, you're thinking about your body, you're thinking about all of these things 24/7. But once the eating disorder loses its grip, that space, that mental space, is filled with so many other things. So if nowadays I were to have a bad body image day, I might feel bad for a minute and then move on, because 99% of that brain space has other things to do, other places to be. And that's very liberating. Also, body image isn't the only thing that's part of that self-confidence equation. Good sense of self-confidence also comes from other areas and building expertise in other areas. So finding your purpose, for example, by enrolling in a course or a job, or learning new skills, engaging in a hobby, etc. All of these things can really build you up. So they're really good as well. There's a related question in the chat. How do you do self-care? Okay. If anyone else has their own self-care practices, share them in the chat now, or share them in the comments for those watching the replay. Some of my favourite self-care activities are having a bath. I find this incredibly relaxing, and I used to not allow myself these things because I thought, environmentally they're not the best, but they are very good for my mental health. And it's not like I'm having a bath every single day. It's a special occasion kind of thing, which is also what makes it so, feel like such a treat to me. So having a bath, just general hygiene. So even if it is a shower, washing my hair makes me feel a lot better about myself. Other self-care activities for me include spending some time outside in nature, whether that is just sitting out in the garden, going for a 15-minute stroll, whatever that may be, connecting with friends so I don't isolate myself, reading a good book or watching a film or a series, reaching out to my family because they live abroad, so just, hopping on a call with them, turning off my phone, my social media, because that is my job and I spend a lot of time on it. I don't want to also spend all of my time on that in my free time. I mean, that's quite a few right there, but hopefully that gets those creative juices flowing. If anyone else has their own favourite self-care activities, let me know. And it could be, doing a face mask, getting your nails done, etc. But it could be as simple as little daily routines, having a cup of tea in the morning, waking up before other people so that you have the house to yourself, going to bed at a sensible hour,
brushing your teeth. Things like that are just as much part of self-care, I think. The final question from this dearest member who's currently sleeping, and I wish I was her. I've got a little bit of a cold, so I'm losing my voice. After this, and after another call I have after this, I'll probably get straight to bed. But she wrote, "There are times I struggle with cleanliness and perfectionism around food. Do you have any tips or advice on coping with and challenging this?" Personally, I would say that time heals. When coming from a past with an eating disorder, all food and rituals feel like they need to be perfect because that one meal, that one eating moment may feel like or may be the only meal. But that's the scarcity mindset. Once your body learns that one mediocre meal doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, because another meal is going to follow, and then another, and then another. This wasn't the only opportunity. I find a lot of the time that this shift happens quite naturally. So yeah, in order to deal with that cleanliness and perfectionism and everything else, just keeping up with the self-care and the nourishment and the regular and the frequent meals. And over time, to a large extent, that will just drop away quite naturally. If there's any specific rules related to that cleanliness or perfectionism, you can also directly challenge them, as we talked about before, and as we have been doing in this past week. One more question in the chat. I feel kind of dissociated from life and don't feel present in the moment and with other people. I'm all up in my head 24/7 and can't come down. Does this subside with weight normalization to set point, hormones, etc.? It feels awful. It does feel awful. I have never worked with a single client who has not asked me this exact question, or, at least 99% of my clients have asked this, and I would have asked myself this during the time of my own recovery. So it's a really good question. It is totally normal to be all up in your head 24/7, because that's what the eating disorder likes. That's how it thrives. But it is something that gets better once you challenge and repeat. Right now, even the act of eating might feel really difficult, or all the things that to a normal person who's never had an eating disorder feel so easy. You might be all up in your head, but yeah, that does subside as you challenge it more, as your weight goes up. You don't need to, wait all the way till you reach your set point. Chances are you'll reach this before, to some extent, or it's a gradual progression. But those things, weight increases, just being more nourished generally, hormones starting to rebalance themselves, they will all play a role in that equation, and they will all help you get there. It's not a matter of, you go from being in your head 24/7 to finally reaching that set point weight and that be completely gone. But instead, you will probably find that every day, or every week, every few weeks, there's small little progressions as you move along that continuum to recovery. We only have 5 minutes left to this call. So if anyone else has any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. If I don't get around to every single one of them, I will answer them in a separate little video after this live as well. For the people who have only just joined or joined the second half of the live, I just wanted to say that I am providing a free 30-minute chat with anyone who's interested. As I said, free, no strings attached. If you just want to talk through some of the goals that you set yourself this week, want to make sure you've got actionable steps to make them happen. And I'll pop the link to my calendar in the chat again for everyone who's only just joined. Oh, I private messaged that one. Let me put that in the chat for everyone to access. Yeah, second point, if you feel like you could benefit from additional support after this week, there's one-to-one coaching, message me, and I also have an 8-week group program starting in February. After last year's success, I couldn't not relaunch it. So yeah, if you're interested in that, there's 2 spaces left. Got some discounts for you, so message me after. If you do have any other questions, pop them in the chat or pop them in the comments after this video goes up for replay. I'll give it a few seconds just so that anyone who does have any questions can pop them in now, but it's only another 3 minutes, and I think if I start answering another question now, I'd probably be cut off halfway through because I do ramble quite a lot. I think this has been really positive. I struggle to express myself when I've got headphones though. I feel really out of it. I feel like I can't have any input from my surroundings. It's a very strange experience, but I'm glad you guys were all here for that and to ask your questions and to join the group in general. I've really enjoyed this week and I hope you have too. I hope you've got a lot out of it and can continue to get a lot out of it. And yeah, I think that's it from me. Have a lovely evening or morning or afternoon or wherever you're based. And thanks for being a part of this live.